Hello there. Welcome to my thought for the day. I hope you're well this morning. We've reached the point in Luke's Gospel, Luke 8, 4 to 15, when we read Luke's record of the parable of the sower. It's a very well-known parable. We will look at it, I think. I never quite know, but I think for a few days. It is the key parable. It is Jesus, I think, in Matthew's Gospel says that if we understand this parable, we have the key to all the parables. And thinking about this parable, and thinking also about the teaching of Jesus in Luke's Gospel, the story of the two men who built houses. That's in Luke 6, 46 to 49. The key thing about both of these parables is that these are not people who've never heard. These are all people who have heard the words of Jesus. And it's their response to those words that makes the difference. In the case of the two houses, the one who does not put into practice the things he's heard builds on sand, and the fall of his house is very great. Here in the parable of the sower, every single type of ground is described by Jesus as on the path, these are those who have heard. On the rock, these are those, when they hear the word, receive it with joy. That which fell on thoughts, those who hear, but as they go on the way, they're choked by the cares. On the good soil, they're those who, hearing the word, hold it fast. So every single type of soil represents people who have heard the word. And my thought for the day is a very simple one. It's summed up in the words of, at the end of verse 7. He who has ears, as he said this, that's Jesus, as Jesus said this, he called out, he who has ears to hear, let him hear. It's all about how we hear. And when we hear, what we do with what we hear. That is the key thing to advancing, to developing, to growing as disciples. It's what we do with what we hear. And and the examples in this parable, just if you get time today, read verses 4 to 8, not the interpretation of it, explanation of it Jesus gives, just the parable itself, and ask the Lord to speak to you. You know, in this world in which we live, it's always amazing to me that in the garden, the weeds grow faster than the cultivated crops, mostly. Why? Because they are the natural seeds of our atmospheric weather system. We live in a certain climate, and there are certain plants that thrive in that climate. And we, being a bit perverse, like to grow things that don't naturally grow in our climate. We grow things that like it hotter or wetter or drier. And they struggle because it's not native. They're not native to our climate. I remember visiting my friend in Australia years ago, and she had a friend who'd come from England, and a portion of her garden near Perth was planted with English plants, with an oak and roses and other things direct from the garden in England. And that part of our garden was thin and struggling. The oak tree was very small. The roses were not very good. It was a real struggle. The other part of the garden that had plants that liked the climate in Perth flourished. Now, why am I saying that? Because what naturally grows in our unregenerate lives, in the soil of our unregenerate heart, are the weeds. They grow easily. But the good crop that brings fruit for eternity doesn't grow very easily. And it needs looking after, just like the plants that struggle in our garden need looking after extra, especially if we're going to get them to grow. He who has ears to hear, let him hear. And when we hear the word of God, let's take it seriously. Let's hold on to it. Let's think about it through the day. When God speaks a word into your heart, let it take root. Let it settle. Take time to cultivate the seeds that God sows in your heart, so that they will come to maturity and bring forth fruit. I think that's all I want to say, really. He who has ears to hear, let him hear. And when he's heard, let him apply the good seed to his heart. These were not people who did not hear or had not heard what Jesus taught. And Jesus knew, as he stood there teaching to all the people that listened, that very few of them would actually bring forth any kind of fruit for the kingdom. That for most of them, even those who seemed very enthusiastic at the beginning, the seed would not come to fruiting, would not develop into a mature plant. It's not the fault of the seed if it doesn't come to fruiting. It's the fault of the ground. The seed will grow, given good ground. That's enough. I'm almost on our sermon. I mustn't. God bless you. I will see you tomorrow. Have a great day. Bye-bye.